Well, the Prime Minister has dismissed calls for a bigger advertising campaign to tackle growing vaccine hesitancy. Let's go live to Trudy McIntosh in Canberra. Trudy, Scott Morrison's not alone in saying, for now, we can take a glass half full approach. And a lot of people's friends, colleagues, family members are the biggest influencer.
Yeah, and Tom, there is a real view amongst state premiers as well that as you see more people going out and getting the vaccine, that will encourage others to follow suit. But the reasoning today from Scott Morrison about why he didn't need a bigger ad campaign to push back against vaccine hesitancy, he cited supply issues, that even if you were to put a lot more money into trying to convince Australians to go and get a jab, it's not going to change the fact that some of this Pfizer supply that we are relying on isn't going to arrive into Australia until much later in the year. The AMA and Labor, though, both calling for Australia to follow what we've seen in other countries like the US and New Zealand, using celebrities to spruik the vaccine rollout. He has indicated that they're willing to spend more convincing elder Australians at the moment who are in the population groups that are able to get the jab to do so.
Well, we are. There's 40 million that the government is investing both this year and next year in the communications campaign. But I'd make this point to you. There's around 65% of the population who's very happy to go on the vaccine. So right now the focus is ensuring that those who are very happy to go and do it, go and do it.
Scott Morrison also emphasising today that GPs and doctors are doing a good job at reassuring Australians who may have concerns about the vaccine that it is important that they get a COVID jab. It was a similar message we've heard from Labor frontbencher Jason Clare today. He's speaking to our chief anchor Kieran Gilbert this afternoon. This interview is interesting that he agrees, yes, Scott Morrison, it's correct that the GPs are doing a good job, but he says they could be assisted if the government went out of its way to have a ad campaign particularly focused on convincing those in ethnically diverse communities.
And as I talk to GPs, they're getting the information out to people and encouraging people to get vaccinated. That's a good thing, but they could do with some help from the government, to be frank. They could do with an advertising campaign in English as well as in the language that's spoken on the streets in my electorate to tell people this is safe and encourage them to get vaccinated. You know, for an advertising man, it strikes me as strange that there's been so little information.
And Trudy, while it's Scott Morrison pushing for the vaccine passport, that people won't be able to be locked down domestically if they have a vaccine, it's the states that will decide whether it actually happens.
It certainly seems that's the way. Scott Morrison essentially raising the white flag today, saying he wants to see this proposal get up, but it's going to be up to the states to decide whether they actually will sign up to this. It's an idea he floated earlier in the week that if you're fully vaccinated, you might be able to bypass border bans and not have to face the restrictions that we're currently seeing if you've travelled from a COVID hotspot. But already some pushback from some state leaders, WA, Queensland, Victoria and the ACT, all saying they need to see greater detail before they would sign up to this. The New South Wales Premier with an opposite approach. She believes even if you're not vaccinated, there shouldn't be any travel restrictions in Australia. The Prime Minister trying to bridge that pretty big divide.
No, I don't believe so. I'm looking forward to those discussions. I think it's a reasonable thing to work through. Now, I know the New South Wales Premier would prefer that there were no restrictions, but she can make decisions in relation to New South Wales, but other premiers, whether it's here in Victoria, Queensland, WA or other places, I'm sure will continue to exercise judgments that they believe to be in the best interests of their states. And so it's a practical proposal, and I look forward to discussing it further with the premiers and chief ministers.
That ambition from New South Wales to not only have no borders internally within Australia, she also has put out that if 80% of people were vaccinated, we could really be considering using our passports to go overseas. It's certainly something that would be welcomed by the CEO of Qantas, Alan Joyce. He says he believes if Australia puts much more effort into the vaccine rollout, it will be possible to open up international borders by the end of this year.
Australians have done an amazing job keeping the lid on COVID. Imagine if we were to put the same focus on the vaccine rollout. Opening up by the end of the year seems very achievable under those circumstances.
That free advice from the Qantas boss as he unveils the impact that COVID's having on the national carrier. He's announced a new wave of redundancies for people working in the international travel part of Qantas. Tom, it seems with the Qantas planes still grounded, particularly for international travel, still plenty of tough times ahead for the airline industry.